The bass, I don't think there's bass in that intro, but the bass is dropped. The trumpets have dropped. People are dancing at home to the theme from Soccer Over There because it's one of those days. We were going to do a watch-along on SDH this afternoon. Well, that got scrapped when everything in Europe went insane with soccer. We're going to try to make sense of it for you tonight, and we've got a rotating cast of characters on the show this evening. Up first, somebody you haven't heard from in a little while, Nick Alifi joins us. What's up?
Oh, man. You know, I was promised that when we had the full lockdown that I would have a tremendous amount of free time to do things like, you know, get really fit and you know, finally take all those masterclass, you know, cooking courses.
I remember you talking about that.
Well, I've only been able to achieve the masterclass cooking courses. That's it. Other than that, I've been, you know, a teacher, which shout out to all the teachers out there because now I know why you guys are always stressed out because our kids are terrible. And thank you to, you know, anybody out there who has played a role in providing live stream content for any of the kids. Jason, that's the thing that's blown me away through all this. And I have to sort of play catch up here is that, you know, we had Dropkick Murphys do a show. Mm-hmm. We had, you know, all the Instagram battles between hip hop legends. We've had.
Have you heard about the one that's, I think, on the table here coming up?
No.
Diddy and Dr. Dre?
Okay, that's one I would tune in for.
Yeah, that's absurd.
Yeah, that's absolutely, and really, I don't even know how you could properly judge that because the late '90s to early 2000s, it was nothing but Diddy and Dre on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it's going to be like the Manny Fresh one where. Scott Storch, if you're a national fan watching, you're like, oh, Scott Storch winning everything. If you're from the South, you're like, no. It's Manny Fresh.
It was Manny. And a funny story, when I used to hang out with some friends of mine down off of North Side Drive. They had a fraternity house down there, and there was a recording studio right next to it. And one night I was leaving, and I wasn't really paying attention, and I almost ran over Manny Fresh.
Well, that would have been bad.
That would have been terrible. It would have been absolutely terrible for the music world. And he could not have been cooler about it. He kind of smiled and waved and, you know, gave the thumbs up like, hey, it's all okay. And then they moved along, and I, you know, tried to calm myself down for almost hitting music royalty and managed to get myself home. But, you know, with all the content that's been out there, some of the people who've been doing like art classes for kids and things like that, it's been helpful. It's been very helpful. But no, I have no free time to do anything. And it kind of shocks me.
Well, let's get caught up because today is one of those kind of days. And before we get into this, I definitely need to do one of those to get ready for this nonsense. All right.
Yep.
France. Let's start with France. So the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, announced today that the sporting season is over because games, including games behind closed doors, will not be allowed until September. Like, France originally had an idea to resume the season on June 17th, finish on July 25th. Ain't happening. Philippe said this, which is there's some weird things in it, and we'll try to parse through it. The 2019-20 season of professional sports, including football, will not be able to resume. It will be possible on sunny days to practice an individual sporting activity outdoors, obviously respecting the rules of social distancing. It will not be possible neither to practice sport in covered places nor team or contact sports. Okay. No Liga, no second division. They are going to figure out what they do from here. And we've seen some different takes on this, and we'll get into that as we go today. But France is the one that really stands to lose the least from this.
Right.
Because their TV money is the smallest. So canceling is not as difficult for the league. Now, this is out of the league's hands. The Prime Minister did this, but Now I want to see, do more follow what the Netherlands and France have done, or are more going to follow what Germany, Italy, and England are trying to do, and Spain, and get back on the field at some point?
Well, one thing is I want to see what the contract language is for the French TV deal, because with the prime minister issuing this, I wonder if that activates some sort of act of God clause in the contract, right, where their money would still be distributed, and or there would be no liability for either party. One of the two. It had Boris Johnson not contracted COVID-19, I would say I think the Premier League's going to cook right on. But since then, he's sort of taken a different tone. And I'm not trying to get political on anything. I'm just simply stating what the man has said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he has been far more of an advocate of locking things down. And remember, he was one of those guys who initially started talking about herd immunity. And now he's like, no, we're locking everything down. So it's going to be a conversation where I think the leagues are going to have to speak to the prime minister or the presidents of the respected countries and say, look, you have to be the one to say we can't do this, because otherwise contracts come into play. Money will be forced to change hands, probably in a negative way for us, and that's not something that we can really handle right now. So I don't think that Ligue 1 is going to be the last one. I'm shocked that Serie A is still talking about trying to get games on when they are just now starting to do restaurant takeout. They are just now starting to relax a little bit of the restrictions that were put in place. It's hard for me to believe that in Bergamo, which was really ground zero for the worst of the outbreak in Italy, that Atalanta could play a match, even behind closed doors. I just don't see how that would happen. Maybe if they pull it off, they pull it off. I'm not saying they can't do it or shouldn't do it. I just don't see logistically how it could be done. And it's the same thing for France. They obviously made that call. Spain, I want to see how they get it done as well. But they're not. This isn't it, man. I don't think this is the last domino to fall.
Well, I want to give you what the president of La Liga, Javier Tebas, said after the announcement in France, and this was from the BBC. Mm-hmm. I do not understand why there would be more danger in playing football behind closed doors with all precautionary measures than working on an assembly line, being on a fishing boat on the high seas, etc. If important economic sectors cannot restart in a safe and controlled manner, they could end up disappearing. That could happen to professional football. In other countries, teams are already training. That's the example to follow. In Spain, football is an important economic driver that we need to reactivate like many others. We continue to focus on this reactivation in a responsible manner and adhering to health recommendations as soon as possible. This is the back and forth, but also when you look at Spain, Fabio Capello has a really good point. He spoke to Marca today, and he said that from his view, the only team that's not going to be destroyed, and that's the word he used, by the pandemic is Real Madrid. He said Barcelona and Atletico are going to suffer a lot. You have bloated wage bills. You have an older squad. They're really going to be hit. So you've got that. You've got Miguel Delaney at The Independent reporting that potentially 4 Premier League clubs could go into administration if the postponement goes on longer than the summer. That's new. We've heard about lower divisions. 4 Premier League clubs could go into administration. Germany, you've got the potential for 13 of 26 teams in the Football League facing insolvency if they can't finish the season. Mm-hmm. Those are all factors too. And that's why this is so complicated and difficult.
I understand what the conversation is right now, which is you have some people who are in the court of restart everything, turn the machines back on. And then you have those who say, no, everything has to be locked down because we can't guarantee the safety. I know that there's a tremendous amount of revenue tied up into this, and revenue equals wages, and wages equal lights being on and mortgages being paid. But the issue I have here is I want games to be played, but I also want things to be done in a responsible manner, and my issue comes in lack of faith from individuals who would carry out those processes and procedures in a way that would allow quarantine to take place amongst the teams. Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take players who sequester themselves away.
Right now it would, yeah.
Yeah, right now. And I'm talking about like playing in May,
right?
Which is what some people have talked about. You would have to start locking players down now, administering regular tests, and then you're talking about transport. So whatever method of transport they use would have to be single use. Like trains in Italy, it would not be cars that would be used for anything else except moving Napoli to and from Rome or Turin or whatever. Same thing with the jets. So when you talk about everything that would have to go into play, the police presence, medical presence, it's very difficult for me to buy into the fact that the leagues could be started any time between now and September. It's just hard for me to buy that. If they can make it happen, I want it to happen. But I understand the insolvency issue. There are things that can be done, and for those of us who are trying to find the middle ground, I think a great many of us are. How can we be safe yet restart this economic engine that is necessary for some of us, present company included, that can make that generate income from games being played. I think we have to look back to World War II. It's the closest thing. Obviously, this is not a war. This is a virus. I don't need 500 tweets telling me that. But when we talk about economic devastation, infrastructure collapse, the challenges of teams not being able to move around, look at Italy post World War II, where you had the creation of smaller tournaments and teams that would essentially they matched teams that were nearby. That one team had the income, that had the facilities and the infrastructure to continue, but not necessarily the players. The other team had the players, but not the infrastructure, and they merged the teams. And Sampdoria was one of those teams. And the world will change. The footballing soccer world will change from this. And if leagues don't adjust quickly, then yes, those teams will go bust. And if those teams don't adjust after a restart, they will go bust, because it's a whiplash effect. That you may have just enough money to get things going, but you're not going to survive a transfer window. You're not going to be able to bring new blood in. So you're going to have to move up academy kids, which means you're going to stink, which means that you may drop down into a relegation zone. You drop into a relegation zone, you may become insolvent anyway. So there's going to be a lot of things that have to be put into play. And for the larger teams, it's not some benevolent rich guy who runs it. It's corporations now, which have teams of people who do risk analysis every day and lawyers who will sit down with the board and say, hey, if you want to be able to do this and not get your pantsuit off by some agent and some player because a player got COVID-19 when we traveled to Atletico, here's what we have to do. So there's a lot of things that have to come into play before we say, okay, let the player start training again. The lawyers are going to have a say. There will be billable hours. The risk analysis will have to be done. And we're going to have to start looking at things like smaller tournaments, maybe blowing up some norms. I saw what Mike Conti posted today about MLB. The Braves, National League, American League, out the window. What's the easiest way to get these teams back and forth to each other? That's what we're going to do. You may have to do that. Italy post-World War II, the Americans still occupied the south of Italy. The north of Italy, they had an insurgency up north of what was left of Mussolini's men and the Germans. And when they were pushed out, then you had the communists, the Soviet Union, at the gates. So you had a lot of things in play. There was no economic engine. Agnelli, who was Gianni Agnelli, who was the heir apparent to the Fiat fortune, had to cut a deal with the Americans to start, get cash injection to start building factories. And they called it. It was Italy. It was Italy's economic miracle. The factories were called mushrooms because they sprouted up all over the north. And as a result, you started seeing, the gears getting loosened up and players being able to play and not have to worry about working in, a bakery or somewhere else, because there was a company that was able to pay that player, Fiat, to get Juve playing again, to have Torino get enough players to be able to play, to get Roma, which was created during the fascist regime. They liquidated a bunch of local teams and formed them into AS Roma, and Roma went forward. And you may see that now, where smaller teams get liquidated or insolvent teams get liquidated, merged with other teams, and a new team moves forward. Jason, this is going to be something like we have not seen since post-World War II, period.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something different than we've ever seen, because I think it's going to end up being different than that, because I go back to what Capello said. Real Madrid, everybody's going to take a hit, but Real Madrid's hit is going to be minor. Barcelona was already looking at a big transfer window coming up because they needed to sell Coutinho. They needed to figure out some tough decisions about contracts, and now all that's blown up in their face. Atleti, same thing. You've got top clubs that are going to go bust if this continues. If you don't finish the current seasons and you have nothing until September, it's not even going to look like post-World War II. Now, I don't know what it looks like. My fear is that it looks more like a European Super League, and the domestic leagues on the whole are shattered and become, instead of being first divisions, they honestly become third, fourth division quality. Because that's the even bigger fear is, we talk about Barcelona having problems. What about, the second division in Spain? Forget it. What about the second division in Italy? I mean, forget it.
Oh,
the second division in Germany is a mess. We've talked about the championship being a problem in England for years going into this. This just blows it up. So it's a scary thing. And I guess where my head's at with all of this right now is, you mentioned it, and it's been what's been driving me crazy with all of it is it feels like it's one or the other. It's either start playing tomorrow, damn the torpedoes, who cares? Or it's don't play until there's a vaccine, and that might be in the middle of 21. It feels like there's not a middle ground. And
right.
And the problem with that mentality, in my opinion, is how much have we learned about this whole process over the last month? I mean, just think about the things that were said when we started this here in the U.S. Think about the things that you were hearing out of Italy at the very beginning that are now different. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can go all the way to, it's going to die off once it starts to warm up. We've seen that that's not necessarily the case. Different things about how to treat it. I mean, now they're even questioning, have ventilators really helped? I mean, it's that kind of process, because this is something we've never seen.
Right.
That could go either way. That could go, we figure out how to treat it, which you have people working on it. Could that happen in the next month? Sure. Could you get lucky and find a vaccine in the next month? Probably unlikely, but sure. Could you not find anything for a year and a half? Yeah. Could you, just continue to go, and every time you loosen up restrictions, it gets worse, and you can't get back to large public gatherings or any kind of, large public thing because of this. That could happen too. We don't know. But right. I think my biggest issue is this idea that, no, you have to just stop everything until September. What is it about September? We don't know anything about September. I think what MLS has done and what I've appreciated with it is they have pushed back gradually. They set a date. Okay, it didn't happen. Pushed back a couple weeks. Set a date. Pushed back a couple more weeks. They're edging back. So when we get to a point that one of two things happen, either we have more safety from things we've learned in the medical community, things we've learned from the scientists, and we have determined that it is safe enough to go forward with public events or behind closed doors, whatever that means, because there's a whole bunch of scales of that too, or we, have found something else, or we've learned something else and we can move forward in a different way, or you're going to get to the other side where you're going to have, not just the clubs, not just the owners pushing because of them being on the brink of bankruptcy. You're going to have the players because, as we've said all along during this, in a perfect world, these guys signed contracts. They are due for the money that they signed. Some players have deferred it. Some players have taken a pay cut. Some players have donated their money to their club. All kinds of different things. But the longer this goes, you're going to have clubs who can't honor those contracts. And once that starts to happen, do you get a bigger push from players to play? I think there's a lot of players who want to play, of course safely, but a lot of players who want to play because they want to better their own situation. They're looking at what could be coming with a big move, et cetera, et cetera. Once the financial side of it starts to hit them, in MLS, for example, there have been no pay cuts. They've been paid, I think, through July at this point. It's set to be normal through that point. Are we going to have MLS in July? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. And what happens at that point? Because can you pay for a season that doesn't exist if you are a club, if you are losing the money that you were going to pay the people with? That's the problem. And I think when setting these huge boundaries on either side, you're setting up failure no matter which way you go. And it's just a scary proposition all the way around. And it doesn't have to be one on the far side to our left or the far side to the right. I'm not talking politics. I'm just making a point.
Right.
Is it at the end of your left hand or at the end of your right hand? It could actually be somewhere in the middle that you work towards to figure out a way to do this. And that's probably the most realistic and likely solution, which will be behind closed doors, and who knows what else you have to do to get it done.
Right, and teams, though, will have to make adjustments. For teams that have banked more on the butts and seats, your calculus is radically changed. If you're now just banking off of TV money, and you're going to have to find other revenue drivers. And
let's be real about that real quick, because I know we've talked about it. How many teams in the world are we talking about that are on we've got to play right now because we got to honor our TV contracts? The Premier League, the Bundesliga, La Liga, Serie A, I think.
Serie A has money that's tied up that they have to get. Even with the way the financial situation is in Italy, even if it's a smaller TV contract, they got to get it.
Okay. UEFA with Champions League, Europa League, all that. There's some others domestically. Probably Mexico is going to start to feel a pinch there. Maybe Brazil. I don't know their TV situation. France was on the low end of the scale. They're going to take a hit because the Prime Minister has outlawed sport for the foreseeable future, but they're going to be able to survive it. That's what, 70, 80 teams worldwide?
Yeah.
That's not second divisions. That's not most leagues in the world. That's not your small grassroots clubs. Everybody else is in this scenario of having to figure it out, whether we're talking about Blackpool with their history and their relative size, Leeds, who's hoping to get promoted, and we'll see what happens. But you're also talking about your grassroots club, our clubs in the NPSL, our clubs in the USL League 2, USL League 1, right. Forward Madison. They're going to have to figure it out because gate revenue is everything to them. Sponsorship is everything to them.
Yeah, and again, that calculus is going to have to get reworked. And not just that, teams are going to have to get down to the nitty-gritty. You're going to have to say, okay, when we do allow a certain number of fans back in, what's our exit policy? Are we going to let the lower bowl completely go out of one gate and then the upper bowl go out of another gate, or do we limit the number of fans that come in? These are all questions that are going to have to be asked. And we've talked about a lot of things, through this, mainly on the financial side. In Serie A, there's 1 point separating Juventus and Lazio.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to figure out a way to get a title winner there. And if Juve's just declared the winner, it's going to be a riot in Rome. Inter is not that far. I mean, they're what, like 9 points or so back, but they have a say in this as well. How are we going to navigate who gets the Champions League in England? If Liverpool's not declared the winner, the uproar that's going to come from that. Oh. But one thing I would like to say is, again, there are no hard, fast rules here. The leagues are under no obligation to do what makes sense to you. So
we've already seen differences there. I mean,
right,
you've got
exactly.
2 top flights that have shut it down. France hasn't made a decision. The Netherlands went the null and void route. They said the season, you have a team that finished first. They're not a champion. You're having no promotion relegation. So the team that was leading the second division by a large margin, they get no reward for that. Argentina has went the other way, which has been reported by other leagues considering it. They're not going to relegate anybody. And they went really radical because it's Argentina, and they're going to really go crazy the right way because that's what they do. Mm-hmm. They're changing their calendar. They're changing the relegation system, which they do it averaged over 3 years. They're basically scrapping the previous 3 years. So relegations aren't going to come back until the end of the 2022 season. So they're going from a traditional calendar to a calendar year. So their seasons, currently 19 and 20, they declared champions. They declared their Copa Libertadores, Copa Sudamericana spots. Defensa y Justicia is going back to South America, if they get to at some point. They're in the Sudamericana. But after that, it's the 21 season, the 22 season. They're changing it all. And they're going back to 26 teams in the first division and chaos. Absolute chaos.
Right.
The Netherlands were like, you know what? No, the season didn't exist. But they got to declare European qualifiers.
Yeah, and that's how that's going to be interesting. And the same thing happened to Torino during World War II, where Torino won essentially this little between the 2 Serie A's that they ran. They didn't have enough clubs to facilitate a functioning season, so they brought up Serie B and Serie C guest teams. Mm-hmm. And Torino was named the winner of this. And Torino was not declared a champion. It was only recently that the Italian Federation said, yeah, you won that. Officially, you won it. But it's not a Scudetto. We're not going to call it a Scudetto. So
it's the Netherlands, essentially. Like, yeah, you were first, and you won, in air quotes, but you're not classified as a champion.
Correct. But I don't think the Premier League wants Fenway Sports Group kicking in the door and saying there will be lawyers. So I'm pretty sure the Premier League is going to say, yep, we're wrapping the season. Congratulations. Liverpool, you're getting the hardware. We'll get you a special walk and honor guard whenever we get back. But for the time being, it is what it is. As far as relegation goes, the teams that are screaming about null and void the season are typically the ones that are near or in the relegation zone. So, what happens with them? What happens with Brescia and Spal, which are historically terrible in Serie A? If they're even solvent by the time this is all over with, do you relegate them? I'm
the
of
Dutch
the opinion,
said no. The Dutch didn't do anything. Argentina said no on the relegation side, but they said they're going to promote people. The Dutch said they're not going to do that. Scotland hasn't made a decision at their Premier League, their Premiership, but because of the way things have gone down, they are going to have promotion relegation, which I would imagine could end up in a courtroom.
And that's my challenge with enforcing relegation in this, is that I don't want promotion and relegation solved in a courtroom.
Yeah.
Because then it's just who has the best lawyers, and I don't want anything decided by lawyers. I would much rather see it solved on the field, or a league say, hey, you know what? In Italy's case, we have 20 teams. Next year, we're going to have 23.
The Dutch said they would not do that. They would not go to 20 teams in the top flight.
Yeah, I just think that, you have 3 teams in the second division who have, fought and battled, and, either one of two things needs to happen. Either one, you give them a Serie A dividend or a top flight dividend, or you promote them on a guest basis and just say, okay, for this, this coming year, you're up. And then next year, we're just going to relegate, we'll relegate however many teams we need to get it right. We have talked about, on our DMs, the chaos that could happen with the lower divisions if you stall the promotion and relegation situation. I think of Palermo, which became insolvent and was buried, and then is trying their best to skyrocket back up to Serie A. I think about Venezia, who, they're under new ownership. There's new financial investment there. If they qualify for Serie A, what are we going to do for them? You're going to have to start writing rules on the fly. You're going to have to start doing what's expedient, and no one's going to do it the same way. And so if you are a fan of La Liga, your situation will be different than how the Premier League will handle it. And so the one thing I will say is I firmly believe in my heart of hearts that Liverpool will be declared the winner. I'm not a Liverpool fan. I've never been a Liverpool fan. I don't care about the cop. None of that means anything to me. I don't think You'll Never Walk Alone's a particularly good song, but they're going to be the winners. I don't care. They're going to be the winners. And they have earned it. They have earned it in every which way imaginable. And I do not want to see the excellence that Liverpool has put forward this past season wrecked because of an act of God. I can't, if an asteroid hit the planet, the last thing before nuclear winter sets in I want to happen is the Premier League to say Liverpool won.
Man, don't kid about that stuff. There's an asteroid that's supposed to be actually kind of close this weekend.
Hey, look, I'm just saying, call it now. Give Liverpool the title. They've earned it. That's right. Sometimes maybe good, but it's. I just think it's something where the leagues need to stop playing around here. The ones that have decided to cancel anyway, and start announcing with immediate effect how we're getting it done. If I'm Serie A, I call Inter and I call Atalanta up and say, guys, you're in the Champions League next year. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get the Scudetto. And then I call Juve and Lazio up and say, okay, boys, you're getting a one-off game, and we're putting it on pay-per-view, and we're going to give the country something incredible. We're going to give them a one-time show, and it can be anywhere you want it to be. If you want it, neutral ground, and put it in Milan. I don't care. Wherever you want to put it. It's going to be behind closed doors, a one-off game, and that's going to be how we're going to do the Scudetto and let it be done on the field. That is what personally I would love to see. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I would love to see, and that's what Lazio has suggested. Let us solve it on the field. And
I think there's definitely some ideas about these playoff situations, or I think Argentina is going to have to do something with theirs, and you want chaos. You look to Argentina for some advice on it. They're going to have to determine 2 spots in the Copa Libertadores for 21, and because of their transition in the calendar as well, they're probably going to do some kind of transitional cup if they're able to start playing later this year. And they've still got the Copa Argentina, which is a calendar year tournament too. The winners of those will go to the Libertadores, and it's just going to be madness. You've seen in other leagues talk about a playoff system for the promotion side, because you're going to have the same conversation about Lazio and Juve. You're going to have it in second divisions and third divisions and in different leagues where it's too close to call, or maybe one team, didn't play the top team yet at all, and the other team played the toughest schedule in the league, and they're a point behind. Stuff like that's going to come up because you don't get to finish the season. It's not balanced.
Yeah, and Argentina. Look, we all know what's going to happen with Argentina. They're going to invent some brand new tournament, and it's going to be the guys are going to be playing 365 days a year.
They would if they
we
could.
know where this is going. Yeah, they would if they could. With Argentina, we know what's the direction it's going in. One thing that was said by the former Leeds chairman, it said there's no better time than now to correct some of the issues around finances in football. And I think I don't think that's going to be a forced correction. If anything, this has shown, and David Amoyal talked about this on the Coucherland podcast as well. I have to give credit where credit is due. He said this shows where some of the clubs, the margins are so thin. We always think that soccer is some super huge, mega profitable business. And for some it is, but for a lot of them it's not. We're seeing how these margins can vaporize in a heartbeat. And there will be financial correction, whether we want there to be or not. Even if we start playing now, there will be massive correction, one way or the other. It's going to be an opportunity for some people to buy in, and it's going to be a sad situation where some clubs get wound up. It just happens. But that's where I hope the novelists are out there with pen and paper ready to go. I hope Michael Cox, who did zonal marking, is pen to paper writing out how this is going to play out, because this is going to be something that we've never seen before. The way that each club handles it's each club, but each federation handles it. It's going to be wild to see like how it gets shaken out, because how England handles it completely different. The Dutch, very Dutch way of doing it. It is the most. Can you imagine Frank de Boer sitting down there like, there will be no winner. We're just going to void and come back and try again. Like very Dutch, cut, dry, end. Thank you. We're moving along. France, I'm shocked that they, of course it was the prime minister who came in. I want to see how they're going to handle it, because PSG says, yeah, we're still going to do the Champions League, but we're going to do it abroad. Like we'll go somewhere else and play. How do teams, especially the upper echelon teams, they will find a way to get money. They will find some place to go, like Saudi Arabia, like UAE, like Qatar, where they can say, you got a stadium for us? Yeah, we're going to come in, we're going to put on a tournament. We're going to come and we're going to play, you can call it the Super League, you can call it whatever you want. And these top-tier teams, they will find a way to get money. But Ipswich Town can't do that.
Yeah, you're not going to have the playoffs for the championship held in New Zealand, since they eradicated the virus.
Right. Sassuolo can't do this.
No.
The upper echelon clubs will find a way to generate
Juve, maybe in New Zealand. Maybe that's where you have it.
I'm okay with this. Look, she seems to have her act together down there. The leader of that coach, she has it.
They say they got rid of it.
They say they got rid of it. The players get sequestered for 14 days following New Zealand rule. Everyone's cool. Great.
Well, you got one problem with that. According to the Spanish sports show El Chiringuito, I'm very confused by this, but Paulo Dybala has reportedly tested positive for the coronavirus for the 4th time.
Oh yeah, if you, one of the things that we've seen is that if you get coronavirus, it's not like getting chicken pox, where you get it, you've got it, you're good. It seems to keep popping back up.
Yeah, that's what we can't tell, and that's the confusing part. Like, has he had negative tests in between there? Has it just never cleared? What is the time frame of this? But that's going to be an issue with all of this.
I mean, and if you're Juve, Gonzalo Higuain, as far as I know, he's still in Argentina. Is he going to fly back to Italy to play for Juve? So if you are Juve and you're down Dybala, you're down Higuain, that's a competitive disadvantage. And that if I'm Juve's lawyers, I'm in court saying there's no way that we can
give us
compete.
The title.
Yeah, give us the title and get it over with, or just call the season void and keep it moving. But one way or the other, that's one thing that has to be factored in here are the players, because there are players, especially in Serie A, who have contracted coronavirus. And, I understand there's 57 different things that come across through the media about what happens here. But one of the things that has been pretty much universally agreed upon is that it is capable of causing long-term lung damage. Mm-hmm. How will these players come back, fully recover, and be ready to play in a month, 2 months, 3 months? These are things that we're going to have to factor in.
But again, and this is where I think this gets really difficult, is right. Absolutely, that's going to be a factor. But is that a factor to not play until we know more? Like, you know what I mean? Like that. That's the problem with where we are in the conversation right now, and that's what's so hard about all of it is, you're going to have players whose careers are affected, who have tested positive. They're not going to be the same player they were, after or before they tested positive with this. You're going to have some who tested positive have no effect. You've had players who, I believe there have been some players, former players at least, staff members who have passed away. You're going to have these things happen. There's no way around it. It's affecting everybody in society. Our sport's not going to be anything different. But it gets back to that, like, well, when can you figure out when you can play? And I think that's the biggest question in all facets of this, whether it's, sports, whether it's restaurants, whatever. It's when is that time? Do we have an idea of what it takes to reach that time? Or do we have to wait to be like New Zealand? Do we need New Zealand to run the world? Is that what we need?
I welcome our New Zealand overlords.
I'll be a Kiwi. I'm down.
I'm down with being a Kiwi. But I will say, in my opinion, is that organized sports happened in 1918, right? Mm-hmm. Organized sports happened in 1919, 1920, 1921, 22, all the way up to now. We are not the first people to have participated in organized sports. Remember that there was the Spanish flu, and things happened, things stopped,
things adjusted,
things picked back up, things adjusted, and things continued. It will be solved. What we want, selfishly, is it to happen on our timeline, on our acceptable timeline. We want these things to happen. When I put forth something saying we have to consider the players, can players be ready to go, and for players who have contracted it, I'm not trying to be negative, Nelly. I'm simply saying the fact that it's something that has to factor into our equation here. But the sports will continue. If Ipswich Town, and I keep going to Ipswich Town because they're the smallest team I can think of outside of C.S. Lebowski, outside of Florence, if they go bankrupt and a bunch of guys from the Ipswich Town pub get together and start playing, and they get a couple of people from the other nearby town to start coming over and playing, and they all throw in a couple of pence each to keep it going, congratulations. It's a new pro sports team. It's going to happen. And things will happen. Some teams that we love will go away. Some teams will start up. Some teams will be back like nothing ever happened. Do you really think, though, that the NFL is not going to put on games with that machine?
Yeah.
The NFL's
if they
happening.
do, and if the NBA does, and then you start to see, okay, the trickle down of, all right, some of them have done it. It's almost like we're at the point now where it's the right thing to say is, don't play until somebody does it. And Germany is the one that it's totally conflicting information at the moment. So in Germany, you've had teams have training sessions. It's been small groups. It has not been a traditional training session. You had, according to Bild, the Federal Ministry of Labor give the go-ahead, and this was all related to occupational safety. If you haven't followed Derek Ray and his updates on this, he gives you a very German perspective on it and how, you have the Ministry of Labor involved. You have all these different, checklist things that are getting done before you get the go-ahead. Well, the Ministry of Labor, it all sounded good. Well, Ole Gump at the Daily Mail wrote that, well, maybe now it's not going to be so good because there's potential, and I have not seen this confirmed, of a spike in cases after that lockdown has loosened a little bit. And it sounds like Thursday will be the day that we'll know what the timeline looks like for Germany. That's when Chancellor Merkel will discuss with prime ministers the Bundesliga and other topics of this. So you're getting both sides of it in Germany, and they've been maybe out of the major countries, major leagues, they've been the country that has maybe been in the best position with the virus, and their league is maybe one of the more aggressive ones, probably because of that, in getting back to action, and we still don't really know what it looks like. Right now, May 9th is still on the table for them to play games. I'm not buying it. I think we're talking, third week of May at the earliest. If you haven't had group training sessions, I think you're later in May, which would still be ahead of everybody else.
What's going to happen here, Jason, I think that you're going to see a couple of leagues that are going to look around who have traditionally not held on to a large part of the market share and said, we have an opportunity here to put forward a product and get ourselves front and center with nothing else going on. UFC tried it with the unbelievably awesome Mortal Kombat scenario.
Jeez.
Where Dana White allegedly had
Fight Island.
Right, yeah. He had an island locked down, ready to go. Fighters were going to come in, sequester, 14 days, train, and put on a pay-per-view. He had it all lined up.
Sweep the leg. You have a problem with that, no sensei? No mercy.
No mercy in the dojo. But, there's somebody out there who's going to see what's happening now with the audience share that's coming from The Last Dance, which is an incredible documentary, and from the NFL draft, and they're going to want to jump in. NASCAR's been doing that so far with their digital races until one of their racers went off the rails and being an idiot.
Yeah, there was that.
But yeah, there was that to factor in. But all we're waiting on is a Germany or somebody else to jump in and say, yep, we're playing. We're going right now. This is it. Concrete date. And it will take a prime minister or someone else saying, no, it's not going to happen. Because that's the only way that they're going to be able to void contracts. That's it. Or to put a pause on a contract or not.
Potentially. And that's still, I think, a hypothetical.
Oh, right. No, it's still going to go to court no matter what. But it's the one thing to say, well, we really can't because our government leader, said we can't do anything.
Right.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., Major League Baseball, I think they're going to pull it off. I think they're going to, based on the plan that I saw, it looks viable. It looks like something they're going to be able to do. But I also think that the contracts, the way they're written in the U.S., if a player goes and does something stupid, like goes out to the club or goes to a bar and gets sick, the contracts, the way they're written here, I think the players are less likely to do something that's stupid.
Yep.
Over in Europe, I'm seeing videos from players like Mosa Ken. What are you doing?
Man. Oh, my God. What are you doing, man?
Oh, my God. As much as I've stuck up for that guy, oh, my God.
Seriously.
But
we've got entirely too many troublemakers here.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't, it's like what I said earlier. The issue isn't, I don't think we can't pull it off where like the local governments and the state itself can't pull it off. I think they can. I don't trust that players aren't going to go sneaking out or have their girlfriends or the side chick or whoever else coming through. I don't see that not happening.
Oh, it'll happen. Somebody will get the virus because of something stupid like that. And yeah, it will happen. And then you get to the point of, okay, where is our testing at this point? What is the quarantine situation at this point to go along with the testing? Are we going to get to a point that the testing can say, all right, player X, I mean, we're not going to pick which player would be most likely to break lockdown and catch the coronavirus, but let's say he is player X and he gets it, and his team played another team. They played another team the day before the positive test comes out. Okay. Are we going to be able to test that other team and have them have accurate results immediately? Is it going to take time? When are we going to know that level of knowledge about it to be able to handle those situations? Because that's a big part of this, because we saw it with the NBA. That was it for the NBA.
That was it. Rudy Gobert messed it all up.
He did. Because the plan was behind closed doors. It was going to start the next day. They were going to make the announcement. And we have a positive test, shut it all down. Because you were going to have to at that point, because of what we knew and where testing was. And I don't know how much has changed at this point. At that point, you were going to have to take every team that the Jazz had played over the last 2 weeks and put them into quarantine. Yep. Now, they really didn't. And that's another part of this. There was discussion about it. They did testing on everybody. They, I think, isolated a couple of players, and that was about it. If that's the case, then that hypothetical about, okay, one player catches it, everything shuts down, well, is that true? Or is it just one player sick and you have to keep him away from everybody until he doesn't test positive? And these are the things that we don't know yet. And these are the things that I hope we learn soon, because then we can probably function a little bit better. That's what's so difficult with all of it. Before you go, because I know you've got limited time, we have to talk about this little thing that slipped under the radar today with all the other madness.
Let's go.
This is it's been reported in a few different outlets. I got mine from the Liverpool Echo because the Liverpool Echo was using this to throw shade at Carlo Ancelotti and Everton. Phil Kirkbride said that Everton's goals of getting into the Champions League might not be too likely with a potential scenario that's on the table. This is a proposal. The FA has not voted yet. The FA will be working with its stakeholders to, quote, reach an acceptable position. Well, this is the proposal that's on the table. Starting in the Champions League in 2024/2025, it would be 32 teams. Okay, and deal.
32
the Europa
teams.
League would have 32 teams as well. Okay, that's a little different. Yeah. The Europa Conference League, which is going to launch in 21, that would have 64 teams. Okay, yeah, whatever. All right. The way that you get into the Champions League would change just a little bit. It would be based on a team's league position in the previous 4 seasons, starting from 2020 to 21. It's not going to be one good season and you get into Champions League. It's going to be an aggregate. It's like the Promedios in Argentina, the relegation in Mexico, before they got rid of relegation. It was like that, where they averaged seasons. They did 3. Europe's going to do 4. And then the only way to qualify for the Champions League after this, whatever number gets in, would be to win the league title or reach the semifinals of the Europa League. So that means let's say you're Everton. Let's take them for an example. You're a one-hit wonder. Well, no, let's take Atalanta, because that's the even better one. Because
there you go. That's a great example.
What did our friend Agnelli say about Atalanta? Well, they shouldn't be in the Champions League. They had one good year. They shouldn't be in the Champions League.
They shouldn't be in it.
Now they wouldn't. They would, I think, go to the Europa League because of their one good year. Maybe they would go to the Conference League and have to play their way up. It's madness. It's not quite the Super League, but my guess is 32 teams, 4 groups of 8. That's 14 games in the Champions League that you play. Maybe just the group winners go to a semifinal and a final. 14 additional games. Potentially, they could do 8 groups of 4 and have more of a playoff system, depending on which way they want to go. But it's going to be more of a closed shop. Not a completely closed shop, but more of a closed shop in European play. Proposal, anyway.
Well, just keep in mind that about, 2 years ago? Is that when Bill dropped their whole thing about the secret meetings to create the Super League?
Oh, yeah, there's that.
The idea was that the European clubs were looking around and they saw the NFL. And the NFL, we use the Cleveland Browns as an example, could be absolutely terrible and still make an insane amount of money. The idea was that the European clubs were looking around.
Of course, John comes in and breaks everything because that's what John does. Hello, John.
Morning.
No.
But when you're these large clubs, you have to find a way to protect your revenue. That's it. There's no reason why should I give up a chunk of my cash to support a one-off team. And so when they talked about the Super League at the time, Milan was a little more competitive. They were a legacy team. They would have brought eyeballs. So Milan was involved. Obviously, in this scenario, Milan would not be involved. Small potatoes to the rest of these clubs. But there's no reason to have these one-off clubs in their Super League. But who loses on this? UEFA, right? The Champions League is very important to UEFA. So they have to make sure that... Did UEFA lose? Not in this scenario.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, UEFA had to come up with a scenario that addressed the key concern, which was protecting elite European club revenue. And if they were able to do that and keep their gravy train working, then they could readjust and alter the Champions League. As long as they did it on a timeline that was acceptable for the elite clubs. The way it's working now is not. It's just not. No, it doesn't work for everyone.
From a business standpoint, no. It's not the
no.
smartest way to make the most amount of money for the elite.
No, and there's too many businessmen involved in top flight soccer now to not get that corporate approach. Like why are we running with this glut? We need to trim this down, make it more streamlined, and then we get more of the pie as a result. That's what's going to happen. And if somebody moves up via the the Europa League, it's a vetted opponent, right? And they're in and they're out, and it satisfies UEFA's ability to have promotion and all that. But it's going to be this is as close, I think, as we're going to get to a Super League outside of a small off-season tournament. I think this is as close as we're going to get, and very good for UEFA for recognizing the situation. They obviously didn't have a lot of leverage here. I think Germany was the one thing that was keeping this whole thing from happening because players have to sign a dual contract. You sign one with the Bundesliga, and then you sign one with your team. As a result, even if you were able to have Bayern Munich go to a Super League situation, they wouldn't have necessarily been able to bring the same players with them. So This way, the federations are happy, UEFA's happy. Hopefully, the elite clubs can keep the ball game as close to normal as humanly possible.
We will see. Gwen just walked in. That creaking you heard was her climbing up into her chair. She has claimed a chair in my room now, doing the show, and she's sitting up staring at me, which is a little unnerving.
Show producer Gwen.
She thinks so. Yeah, this whole Champions League, Europa League thing is madness. So 64 teams in the Champions League and Europa League, another 64 in the Conference League, which would just be another level of it. And you would be able to win your way up to the next one. I would want to see the breakdown because I want to start to see, all right, how many legacy teams get in from England? How many from Italy? How many from Spain? How many from Germany? You know, does the Netherlands, do they just not get a seat at the table? Is it just going to become, you know, the top 4 leagues, top 5 leagues, whatever? They get teams into the Champions League. Everybody else has got to get in through the Europa League. But with only 32 teams in the Europa League, probably what's more likely is who are some Champions League teams we've seen in recent years that have been a surprise? Basel, Ajax, obviously. Steaua Bucharest. You know, I mean, you can go on and on. Atalanta is a prime example. We've seen it from big countries,
Red Bull Salzburg.
Red Bull Salzburg. Red Bull Salzburg out of Austria would not be getting into the Europa League with 32 teams there. They would have to go to the conference after they qualify, win their way, get to the semifinals to get into the Europa League. Then in that next Europa League campaign, they would have to get to the semifinals to get into the next Champions League 3 years later.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
And this to me just looks like it you know, they're trying. It just looks like a way that they're trying to freeze out. You know, why should Liverpool have to go play young boys in Switzerland, right? Why do this? You know, let's find a way to break off more of the pie. Let's try to find a way to maintain a little bit more control for the elite. That's what's happening here. I'm not mad at it, because I would rather have Liverpool play in the Premier League and this revamped Champions League format than have Liverpool go into a Super League that's virtually closed.
The Super League would have never happened.
I think it was probably closer to happening than a lot of people would want to believe. I would, because Elkan, who runs the Exor, which is the parent company which Fiat and Juventus fall under, they're not making the kind of moves that they were making unless it was farther along than people would like to believe it was. A lot of the rules that are here strongly resemble the Super League rules. Because UEFA would, for it to be sanctioned at all with Europe, UEFA says you have to have promotion and relegation. There is a promotion and relegation element in here, something that's probably going to have to go through some courts, but it's there. And
this though, it's different because it's not really that. You had to have the carrot, because you're not going to get the UEFA countries like San Marino, like the Faroe Islands. You're not going to get them to vote for this because they're not going to get anything out of it. There's got to be that carrot that, the champion of the Faroe Islands can actually somehow get into the Champions League. So you have that. But by doing it in a Champions League format, it's not exactly promotion relegation. I mean, if you don't, outside, because you have the 4 years of, cumulative numbers. So that's how you qualify year after year. You're not really relegated because you don't own a spot. You just have 4 years to hold your spot, essentially.
Right.
So that's what's interesting. I mean, the idea, like the English press flipped out about the whole, the Big Four, the era of trying to get to the top 4 is over. Kind of, but however many spots England gets, and I don't think they're going to get less than 4, you're still going to be judging that every year. What were we doing about the Superliga in Argentina? We were watching the numbers and how it adjusted for Maradona and Gimnasia to stay up.
We were following that thing like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it changes what the numbers mean. It changes how you follow it, but you're still looking at how you hold your spot. So it's just moving the needle a little bit.
And just think, if let's say that Man United misses the cut by a year, right? Like if they lose like 1 or 2 games, they're out of the top 4 enough to not qualify. That game that they're in still means something, right? Yeah. That game oh my God, if they miss out, it's another window they have to wait. But it does change. Because if you are a large club and you, like, let's say AC Milan, and you miss out, and because Milan would not qualify. As of now, they would not qualify to be a part of this.
Well, now remember, it's going to be over the next 4 years. It would start in 24,
Jason?
25.
Jason, they're not going to sniff the top 4 in the next
Who knows
year.
what the next 4 years will look like, remember?
4 years. It's not happening. It is not happening. I don't care if they get Ralph Rangnick and they bring in the entire Red Bull's organization to run it. They call it Red Bull Milan.
Now, we figured it all out. We figured it out. Ralph Rangnick and the Milan board, they saw the coronavirus coming. They saw it coming. They said, we're going to go get somebody who does not need a specific skill level. We can teach a team how to press. We can teach our academy kids how to press. We got 4 years to do it now because of this Champions League thing. We'll be fine in 4 years because our kids will be able to run for days.
Hey, you know who's running Milan right now? The Elliott Fund, the textbook vulture hedge fund that sees every crisis coming from 15 miles away.
So what do? You go get a manager who, it's not about flair. It's not about, technical ability. I mean, it is to a degree. Don't get me wrong, but you can teach how to press a little bit more than you can teach how to play the Pep Guardiola style, for example.
Hey, look, Giuseppe. Give me Giuseppe, Mario, Paolo, Giovanni.
You ready to run, kid?
You ready to run? Let's go, kid. Time to fire it up.
You go chase that guy everywhere.
That's it. Wherever the ball goes, you're moving. What else do I do, Coach? Nothing. Just chase the guy with the ball.
It's like Pippin on Magic.
That's it.
It's going to turn into Arkansas basketball in Milan, Italy.
90 minutes of hell.
Because that's all you're going to be able to do. Because, I mean, what we talked about earlier is going to come to the fore now. Talented players are not going to disappear. They're still going to be around, and they're going to make less money because there's going to be less money to pay them. But you're going to have some clubs, because it's happened throughout history. It's happened in leagues across the world where clubs' financial situations change. And when they don't have the money to go out and buy the best talent, they have to find a way to compete. Pressing is a way to spend less money on talent, but potentially, if you get the system right and you teach it rightly in the right way, you can compete that way.
Well, it's the new Catenaccio. It's the new Catenaccio.
Yeah, in a way.
It's all it is. Old Catenaccio was we have a team that is not very good, not very fast. We can't afford faster guys, better guys. So we're going to run this system that tactically brings the game to whatever speed we want it to be. And all I need my guys to do is defend and then counterattack violently. That's what Trapattoni always said. I want my team to counterattack violently.
Just instead of sitting back to defend, it's stepping up high to defend. That's all.
Exactly. And so, the market correction's happening. I don't think we're going to see a 200 to 300 million euro purchase any time within the next 3 to 5 years.
No.
And there will be a snowball effect on that. Players who we thought were going to go for 50, 60 may now go for 30, 40. There's real concern now in Milan that they were trying to get Gigi Donnarumma sold for 40 to 60 million. Is that now 20, 30? And if Gigi Donnarumma is worth 20 to 30, what is Ezequiel Barco going to be worth?
Yep.
Right? I mean, it's a roll down and it's a market correction. So all of these things are going to be very interesting to watch. And I appreciate, and I got to say this before I jump off. I received several DMs. Hey, Nick, haven't heard you on the air in a while. Are you okay? Is everybody with the family all right? Thank you so much for checking in. We are A-okay over here. It's just when you're trying to get two kids schooled up and keeping track of them and trying to keep them from going insane and keep yourself from going insane, as you all know out there, putting on a show is very difficult. And plus, with my 9 to 5, we are in full overdrive right now. So thank you so much, everyone, for checking in. I'm going to do my very best to try to be on more of these shows and these calls when I can be.
Well, I've got some footage from your teaching.
Ooh, yeah?
I've got some behind the scenes footage. It was a little bit like this.
I wish you could just shut your big yapper.
Hey, look, sometimes you gotta let these people know what they're doing.
Put them in the corner.
My kids, here's the thing, John. If I put my daughter in the corner, she's gonna climb the corner.
Of course she is.
Yeah, she's gonna climb. She is. I thought I was the warlord. No, we have found who the real ruler of the house is.
Oh, the Duchess would get parkour into that house sooner than anybody. I mean, I could see her running stunts for Bond movies. Way this is done.
Oh yeah. And she, I mean, like in a ballet tutu, she's launching off of tables and couches, full flight. I can't tell you the number of times I've thrown my back out having to do diving catches like Julio Jones style, trying to keep her from smacking onto the floor.
Andrew Jones in center field.
Oh yeah. So it's real. It's live. But I have a lovely, when we do video calls and video conferences, I have a lovely new background that we have custom created just for that purpose.
Oh, very nice.
The office, we're upgrading it. So whenever we do
break
these,
that out here shortly.
Yeah, we'll break that out. But
now
guys,
that I'm
love the
learning
time.
my production skills. So yeah,
There you go.
We will do that here shortly.
There we go. All right, I've got I have beverages to make. Apparently, I'm being told, and food to serve up, and the Duchess is beating on the door. So that's my cue. John, you're tagged in. Thanks, guys. Have a
hot tag.
Mucho Euro.
All right. Good to hear from the garlic bread warlord, and all as well. The whole situation today all over the place is crazy, and one we haven't touched on yet, John, is the chief doctor of FIFA coming out and...
Go ahead and lay it out.
Well, he played the hypothetical game, and he played the, like my opinion game, and that's very reckless at this point.
Mm-hmm.
None of us know where this stuff stands, but he said that he would warn against restarting the interrupted campaign, prepare for action next season. That doesn't change timelines much at all. Michel Dehuga, he said, as a doctor, he would be skeptical about continuing leagues. The quotes from him: my proposal is, if it is possible, avoid playing competitive football in the coming weeks. Try to be prepared for the start of good competition next season. Okay? There is a risk, and it is not a risk that has small consequences. It can have consequences of life and death, and that is why I am so careful, and I ask everyone to be very careful before deciding to play again. I speak as a medical doctor. I don't have to speak as an organizer of matches, but for the moment, from my medical standpoint, I would be very skeptical. How will you avoid direct contact? That is my question. For the moment, the criteria means it is absolutely difficult to say that we can play competitive football, and believe me, I regret it profoundly because I am a football man. I am a little bit afraid that to have a complete solution, we will have to wait until we have a vaccination program. But I think the time has come now to think of some hygienic rules. For instance, to avoid spitting. Why do we have to see that in football and not in other sports? This is one of the things we have to consider because this is a real danger in the future. Nothing he said is incorrect. I think the wait until there's a vaccination program is unrealistic. But did anything he said here, is it just factually wrong? No. But the chief doctor of FIFA to say these things, to go from you can't have direct contact to can we get rid of spitting? I mean, like, you're all over the place. You probably just shouldn't give the interview. Just say no. Just walk away. Because you've put yourself, and now you've put the organization in a situation where when the Premier League or the Bundesliga or La Liga or whoever decides to play games, they're going to be asked. Well, FIFA's chief doctor said this on April 28th. And the problem is it's all changing. By April 30th, it could look very different. You could have very different things said. This was an incredibly reckless thing to say. And I think to have this interview on BBC Sport, you've now made it more difficult for everybody to figure out what the pathway is.
Yes.
I mean, the spitting thing. Sure,
Yeah.
I have no problem with giving a yellow card to anybody who spits. That's fine. I don't care. I mean, there's a big difference between spitting on somebody, which is a red card straight away, and spitting on the ground. If you want to say that spitting on the ground's a yellow card, fine. I don't have a problem with that. You're not going to be able to play games where you're worried about direct contact. And again, it goes back to testing. If you've tested everybody and you're doing all of the proper procedures and players are doing what they should do, and whether it's the lockdown or semi-lockdown or whatever they're in, if they are given the all clear, then yes, you're going to have direct contact. Like, that's going to happen. Football will not wait until there is a vaccination program.
Mm-mm.
It's just not going to happen because, honestly, I don't think any industry is going to wait until there's a vaccination program. They can't. Like, we have to be realistic about that. They can't. Industries that do are not going to exist. That's a real thing. This is just... It just complicates everything. In some ways, we'll see if this really catches on as a thing that changes the conversation. I don't know if it will or not, but I think it was a very ill-advised interview to take because there's no benefit to come from it.
Yeah, and he says that football can only be possible if contact is possible again. Football remains a contact sport, and avoiding contact is one of the first things everyone says is that you should avoid contact.
And but
yeah.
You can have contact if you know people are cleared. That's the whole point. Like, and this is where the conversation can get so bent out of shape and unrealistic. Let's talk about contact, for example. Like, nobody is saying if you live in the same household with somebody and everybody is good to not touch somebody in the household. Like, that is not happening. Nobody has said that. So now you have to extend the idea that everybody in the household is good to everybody participating in this contact sport is good. That's the step. Like, testing is left out of this completely in this conversation. Don't know if it happened in the interview. If it didn't, then I'd have to wonder what the interviewer was doing. Because that's the key to it, right? Am I crazy?
Quote, it's still about social distancing. Testing is an important point, but you have to repeat them. If one of the players...
Absolutely. Correct.
Yeah, if one of the players becomes positive, you have to put the whole group into quarantine. Is that a solution for a normal competition? It's not a matter of money. It's a matter of life and death. You cannot play in the Premier League when players are obliged to remain 2 meters from each other.
Well, they're not. Throw that nonsense out. That's the whole problem here. Yeah. Throw that idiocy out of it because you're not going to be playing in the Premier League with players 2 meters from one another. It's not happening. You're not playing games, as we've said for the last week. You're not playing games until you're past that point. So to even bring that point up is a waste of time. Like, yes, you have to continually test, just like you do for everything else. And it goes back to what Javier Tebas said, the president of La Liga. If you are going to start to take steps to working on an assembly line or working in a factory or whatever it is, why is sport, except for the audience part of it, which play behind closed doors? That's what you got to do. It's what you got to do. But why is the sport pushed to the side when others are not? And that gets to that conversation about what's important. Is sport that important? Should you just push it to the side and let the business, in a lot of ways, fail? I don't know. Like, I don't know. But if you have other things coming back, what is the line for sport to come back?
Right.
Because what happens in a factory?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody tests positive, what do you do? Like, what you're not seeing now, and I think we did see some of it early on, and obviously here right now we're not seeing it at all, and there's a big issue with this and how this is going to go, but is the whole factory getting shut down for an indefinite period of time? No. If somebody in a hotel room at the beginning of this, if somebody on a plane and it was tested positive, was that plane put on ice for an indefinite period of time? No. What did they do?
Nope.
They took care of it. The person who was involved was obviously quarantined. What happened with the NBA? And this was at the very beginning of this. We know more now than we did then, I would hope. But what happened with the NBA? The Utah Jazz were in Oklahoma City. Rudy Gobert tested positive. That's when everything stopped. But the teams that had played the Jazz, one of them was the Knicks. They were in Atlanta. Correct? That game was in Atlanta, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think that's right. They played the Hawks. They were not quarantined in Atlanta. Like, they went home. You know, the Jazz were tested. They didn't fly back. They bussed back to Utah. The players that tested positive, and the test was done that night, they were isolated. Like, that was then, and these things were to that degree. Now, obviously, when you get to this point, are you going to, because one player in the league tests positive, are you going to shut the league down? Is that where we're at? Like, these are the types of questions that I think nobody's really answering, and it's just thrown out there like, okay, one player's going to end everything coming back, and do we know that? Is that the way to handle it? Is there another way? How are we going to know these things? And I want to make it clear, like, we shouldn't play until we know these things. Like, these are important questions. They need to have answers before you get to the point where you are playing. But these are things that I think should be answered by now. And these plans need to be made public, because then maybe we start to have a real pathway to playing. I think Germany has a pretty comprehensive plan put forward about playing, because it's going through every approval process in the German government to get back on the field. Maybe that's the blueprint. I don't know.
Well, and for those that are active on the Twitters, Derek Ray has done some quality stuff when he has been keeping track of what's been going on in the Bundesliga. So if you're looking for any kind of updates when it comes to what they're thinking, when it comes to coming back out and playing matches and their new normal, Derek has become a must-follow in this situation. And, you know, the discussions on his timeline today had to do with the new normal and salary caps and the economics aspect of it all. But, you know, in days previous, he has talked about what the plans may be for the Bundesliga when it comes to getting back out there. So if you're looking for those kinds of updates on a daily basis, I would highly recommend following Derek, not just for his Bundesliga follows, but for everything else that he has on his timeline, whether it's talking about Scotland or England or the game in and of itself. Derek has become a must-follow these days for all this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And we're all figuring out what's next. You did mention a magic word, though.
In Scotland, today...
We do have an update.
Oh, and we do have... Is this an actual word? Or is this just a word that got created?
What word do you want to question, sir?
That real long one that was in the headline.
Well, nobody knows what you're talking about, so please go ahead and explain, sir.
Well, is it the maladministration? Is that the word?
There are things called dictionaries. In fact,
I've never heard of that.
Dictionary.com. So, maladministration Yes, it is a word. It
Far
is
out.
a verb. Maladminister, to administer or manage badly or inefficiently. The mayor was a bungler who maladministered the city budget.
It's just that. Why can't you just? There's got to be shorter words than maladministration. It gives that element of formality to the article that the Telegraph put out, where Rangers say they have evidence of maladministration.
So they have evidence of. I'm going to give it again. I had already gotten away from it, but I'll come back to it. Dictionary.com is your friend. They have evidence of administration that was managed badly or inefficiently. I think they probably do have evidence of that if we're talking about the Scottish League because of the voting process. Now, last week, an investigation by independent auditors Deloitte cleared the SPFL board of misconduct over the question of Dundee FC's misplaced vote, which originally cast, and this is from the Telegraph article, it's Roddy Forsyth. The vote was originally cast as a rejection of the plan to close the season for the Championship and Leagues 1 and 2. That would have defeated the proposal. When Dundee discovered that their voting slip had been submitted in a format that diverted into the mail server's quarantine, called a spam filter, the Dens Park Club requested that it be withheld. So, Deloitte cleared the SPFL of misconduct over this process. Okay, you could be cleared of misconduct, but is it still wrong? I kind of think it is. I'm just saying. And would that be maladministration? Yes. I think it would. Rangers has gotten a general meeting scheduled for May 12th. All 42 clubs will be asked to sanction an independent inquiry into the league's ballot. The requisition of it's actually an EGM, an extraordinary general meeting, and not an extraordinary and, like, it's great. It's extraordinary and it's not ordinary. To have this happen, you had to have 3 clubs support it. Rangers, obviously. Who else supported it? Stranraer.
Gotta be Stranraer. Yeah.
Who is the bottom club in League 1, so they were going to get relegated.
Hearts.
And Hearts. Those are the clubs that supported it, because those are the clubs that were affected by it. So, there you go. We'll have more fun in Scotland, because we always have fun in Scotland.
Well, yeah, we have fun in Scotland because it absolutely takes up a lot of time on the show because of how frustrating it is to see what in the wide world of sports. It makes your head hurt. Everything that went on in the SPFL with this particular vote.
It's a little ridiculous. Yes, and
a little ridiculous.
That's like saying extraordinary general meeting, John, or maladministration. You know what I meant.
And apparently, in addition to the extraordinary general meeting,
it's not like that. You need to understand the differences in our English language and the English language from the area of the world it originated from. Extraordinary doesn't have that connotation.
Scotland has been given a May 25th deadline to inform UEFA of their plans to restart domestic competitions.
Everybody has.
Or alternatively nominate.
Yeah.
Hold
on. That's not a Scotland thing. Let's make this clear. UEFA is not making rules specifically for Scotland. That is everybody. UEFA has said that's the drop dead date. We need to know what you're doing by then.
And also, apparently, the SPFL board admits, and this is from Scott MacArthur in the Scottish Sun, the SPFL have issued an open letter to all 42 member clubs as they called for them to come together for the greater good of the game. And this is also in tie-in with the second external investigation that is called for by Rangers after the vote fiasco. However, from the article, the SPFL have now repeated calls for Rangers to present their dossier of evidence, as they've revealed, and they're issuing a comprehensive Q&A document within the week addressing many of the claims or questions that have been put into the public domain.
I mean, one thing would be, hey, whatever your name is, who controls the email at the office of the SPFL, why don't you log into your spam filter? No, they don't call anybody dog in Scotland. Log into your spam filter. You see that vote? You see when that happened? Yeah, that was before the vote was closed. And why'd you let them change the vote? And oh yeah, by the way, why did you announce the results of the vote to then give them the heads up that they could change their vote and it could actually be really lucrative, maybe? Or just because they had a change of heart. Absolutely. Completely changed of heart, even after they made their vote and thought about it and submitted it and then said, oh, wait a minute. Our vote's kind of important, and it's the only one that's left out. Huh, wonder how that happened. Well, wait a minute, our vote could do what? Oh, yeah, we want to consider it for a few days. Yeah, maladministration, this meets the definition of it. Is that enough to make that vote be upheld? I don't know what the bylaws say. I mean, the legalities of it, I don't know. But should this be questioned? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, this is the worst voting process I have ever heard of.
Short of Chicago, Illinois, in the 1970s and backwards, yes.
I don't know. They didn't have spam filters to deal with.
You think it's worse than the Cook County machine, huh?
It's pretty freaking bad. I mean, you came out. It's bad enough that you missed the vote and it went into the spam filter. That's bad that you didn't check it. But you announced you announced the results. You didn't say they were binding. You just announced the results, and then the one that wasn't counted is like, oh, wait a minute, our vote could change everything. Our vote suddenly is something different than it was before. Like, you screwed up the whole process. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, like, people need to be smacked around about it, for sure. Not literally, but figuratively, or potentially lose their jobs. I mean, let's be real. This is kind of a big deal. Hearts would think it is. Stranraer would think it is. Rangers is being a little crazy because they're not going to win the league. But anyway, yeah. Rangers, although there is an element to Rangers that has not been talked about, and I don't know if Jarrett Smith is going to join us, and I don't think he would want to talk about it because it gives Rangers a little bit of credit. They're still alive in Europe.
Yes.
And if the league is shut down, well, that suddenly gets complicated. Just like PSG has talked about. Like, PSG has said, we're going to play in Champions League. If there's a Champions League, we're going to play.
We're going to play it in Qatar.
Well, yeah, play wherever. Like, they'll do something. But they're going to play. Like, Rangers, how are they going to handle this if they don't have domestic games and European competitions resume? They might not resume. There's probably a fairly good chance that they don't. But does that factor into the conversation? Yeah, it does.
So you look at Hearts specifically, and Ann Budge, the chairman, didn't back down over her demands for cuts as opposed to deferrals. And the last group of...
Hold on. Yeah. Cuts defer about what?
Salaries.
Okay. So let's now we've changed completely. So Hearts wants their players to take pay cuts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And the players came back and said, we want to take deferrals.
Right.
Well, this is a complicated situation because they are on Premiership budgets and they ain't going to be in the Premiership anymore. They're going to get relegated. We're talking about a whole different budget system. Deferrals don't really do anything for Hearts. So that's a tricky situation. That's a tough one. Because it's not like Barcelona players deciding between a deferral and a pay cut. Like, if it's a deferral, you expect that you're not going to have the same drop-off as if you went down a division. So, I'm not surprised there's a big debate there because, yeah, that's going to be worthy of a debate.
Yeah, it was a debate, and the players eventually said that they will take the cuts. PFA Scotland had vowed to fight the move, and they advised that the players that they believed, PFA Scotland thought that the players, if they took it to court, could win a court case. But over the weekend, very, very late, it was said that the players feared that the money saved from their wage cuts would be put toward paying the club's existing debt to shareholders. But the squad in the end thought that the union's bargaining position wasn't strong enough to take things forward. They did agree eventually to Budge's demands. So they are taking cuts.
So they're taking cuts. I mean,
yeah.
Look, we've went through this round and round with all these situations. Could it go to court and the contract have to be paid out? Yep. Could the club go into administration so then the contract doesn't get paid out? Yep. I mean, that's a reality here we're talking about. Also, do players want to be seen as the guy who refused to pay a cut and put a club that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, or hundreds of years, decades, into administration? Do you want to be that player? Probably not. Do you want to have that idea of being difficult during this time for a club that is obviously in financial turmoil? Do you want to be that player that you're branded with that for the rest of your career? Probably not. It's not easy. I mean, it's a no-win situation no matter which way you go. If the club, proposes a pay cut, well, then the club's horrible for not living up to the contract. If the player doesn't want the cut but wants a deferral, well, then the player's not being sensitive to the club. Like, nobody's winning through any of this because that's what the situation is. Everybody is taking a hit. Clubs, players included.
Yep. The owner, Ann Budge, said that if the players did not take cuts of up to 30%, she would press the nuclear button, and this is according to the Scottish Sun, she would press the nuclear button of canceling deals if they did not comply.
Probably because there's not much wiggle room there. I mean, Hearts was in a really bad financial spot before this. So, has it gotten worse? Yeah. Now they're going to get relegated? They very possibly would have been relegated anyway, but now it's done. Are they going to be able to survive, period? I don't think that's a guarantee.
Yeah.
So, is there a possibility of deals getting canceled or the club going into administration and not paying them out? Yeah, absolutely. That's a very valid possibility.
And there was a poll out. The survey showed that 80% of players
Yeah, me want something delicious, but me forgot what it is.
I'm assuming that was something like what John said before he disappeared into the ether, because technology and John don't really get along very well. Maybe he'll pop back in. Maybe not. We'll find out. It's gonna be madness in Scotland. It's gonna be madness in all these countries. There really isn't much of an update on MLS. It kind of is what it's been. They've been very careful to not get too far out in front of anything. They have a training moratorium in place. They have not backed off of the June 8th date, but they're going to have to if they're not training the earliest until the middle of May. We'll wait and see more, but they are incrementally backing up as opposed to big, bold proclamations. None of us really know. And I think as you see Major League Baseball try to figure it out, the NBA try to figure it out, the NFL potentially could be looking at things getting pushed back a month or so, the season starting in October, the Super Bowl being at the end of February the following year. I don't know what the college football season is going to look like. If the NFL's pushing back a month, you would assume that the colleges would too, and then you're crossing over semesters and things get weird. Are colleges even going to be on campus. And, you can have an NFL season without school being in, but can you really have college football if you don't have classes on campus for these athletes to go to? That's another part of it. But MLS is all part of that. And Doug McIntyre over at Yahoo Sports wrote about that today. MLS is going to be careful. I think all of them are being careful. And just like we talked about the European leagues looking at the Bundesliga potentially for a template, MLS, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, college football, they're all looking at one another. The NWSL, the WNBA as well. They're looking at one another for cues as to when to step out there, when to make big announcements, when to unveil plans. One reason why this is an issue is an article over at The Guardian. And it sounds like John might be functional again. Is John with us? Let me ask John a question.
Have you ever seen anybody play the game called soccer?
John is sending written messages, but for some reason has not shown up again. Oh, man. All right. Y'all bear with me for a second so I can get him back on the show. All right. Let's try that again. No, whoops, wrong one. Let's try that again. Ay, Dios mío. All right. He's back. Sending
allegedly
messages really doesn't play well for the audience, John.
No.
Good times. Good job.
Oh, that was great. Yeah, fantastic. Nothing like the pop-up windows from the Daily Mirror locking up your computer.
So that's what you're going to blame it on.
Always. I mean, the Daily Mail gives me problems. The Mirror gives me problems. I don't know what it is. I mean, I've got antivirus protection, and the Norton folks don't seem to want to behave on the new laptop. Yeah, about right.
Yeah. So what I was saying before I was interrupted by your text messages was MLS is watching the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, college football, WNBA, NWSL. They're all watching one another. None of them want to step out too far in front of the rest of the group. Right now, everybody in Europe that is looking to play is looking at Germany because they have been a little bit ahead of everything with the virus anyway. So they would be most likely to get back to action first. Whatever pathway they choose to get there is what people are going to watch. The Guardian headline absolutely is why people are being careful right now with what their proclamations are. Headline from, who wrote this? Jacob Steinberg. Premier League clubs fear becoming scapegoats if game returns too soon. And there's lots of different elements to it. I mean, you got to worry about fans getting together to watch games. There's all kinds of things that factor into that. But more importantly, like, everybody doesn't, you don't want to be the bad guy here. Germany's in a different position. Germany can move forward because Germany has been able to handle it better, and they're moving forward in general faster than others. They're going to set the pace for European soccer leagues, potentially for soccer leagues around the world. And trust me, the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NHL are going to be looking at what Germany does to get back on the field and taking some cues from it. Germany really can show a way forward with this if they do it correctly. If they don't, then, well, they might set everybody back. But nobody else is in the situation that Germany is. They don't want to be the scapegoat. They don't want to be the bad guy for rushing back to action. They don't want to do it half-cocked. They want to make sure that they have a plan that has been vetted and they think will work.
Did you see the article in The Sun where Skybet Championship clubs are fearing they're going to be left in the lurch by the Premier Leagues trying to complete their season?
I don't read The Sun in general out of principle, but what did The Sun say?
Let's see. According to Charlie Wyatt, who wrote the piece, Premier League clubs meeting on Friday to discuss the government's Project Restart plan. And obviously we've talked about the TV revenue at stake, and Arsenal, Spurs, Chelsea, Brighton opened their training grounds, trying to resume full training with an eye to play games again by June 8. But, and this is from the article, an anxious championship executive has told Sunsport there is absolutely no point in the teams from the EFL playing behind closed doors. The money we would get from our TV deal would not outweigh the cost of staging games without paying customers. Premier League clubs might be able to get access to coronavirus testing, but I doubt many teams at our level will have the same access.
Yeah, it's a different world. I mean, that's just a fact. And that's something that you can not like it, but it's a reality. The Premier League, the Bundesliga, that's what we talked about with Nick. These leagues that have huge TV contracts have a very different motivation than the Championship, or especially League One or League Two in England. There's no point in them playing unless there's going to be magical TV money that pops up for them to play. That's a different conversation. Or another compelling reason. MLS is in a very unique situation. MLS would not gain from financially in a big way from playing games this year if they have everything behind closed doors. Why? Because a huge chunk of their overall revenue comes from match day revenue. Not going to have that if everything's behind closed doors. But MLS, from a perception standpoint, would absolutely take a catastrophic hit if the NBA, the NFL, college football, the NHL, Major League Baseball, the WNBA, if they all find a way to play. And MLS said it doesn't make sense for our bottom line to play. We're not going to play. We're going to cancel the season. You've been forever branded as a smaller league. That's a huge issue with this. Also, MLS is going to be in a position to stand to gain by getting back on the field, I think, in the long term, because they're about to negotiate a new TV deal. And they would like to show their partners that, yes, we are good partners. We will take a short-term hit. We'll take something better than nothing to show you that we are an entity that you want to give us more money in the next contract. That's what it's going to come down to. So MLS is going to be in a very different situation. The Championship, League One, League Two, that's why you've seen in a lot of leagues the decision to cancel the lower divisions but leave the top flight open for discussion. It's the TV money, because that's the biggest bucket still on the table.
That executive continued by saying there's still far too many health risks involved at the moment, and I think many players and managers will be reluctant to rush back just for the sake of completing the season before the end of July. The problem is that if the Premier League is saying they can finish by midsummer, how can the rest of us ask for more time? There is huge concern that they will just go to loan and force the lower leagues to call our seasons off.
Well, you can't have everything, and that's the problem. Yeah, the Premier League would have access, because they have more money, to do more things. They'd be able to buy tests. They'd be able to pay for whatever it takes to stage these games for TV, because they have that. But according to, is this an unnamed championship person?
An unnamed championship executive.
Okay, so it is a mystery executive. The news flash for the mystery executive is the Premier League is what drives the largest part of the conversation about the game in England. I know if you love the game and you love the lower divisions, you don't want to hear that. You hate to hear that kind of thing. You can vehemently argue about it, but it's true. It's true. You know, the attendances show it. The TV numbers from a payment and from a ratings show it. It is the bigger part of it. So that's what's going to drive the conversation. And the Championship and the lower divisions are going to have to make a decision. The Premier League's not going to wait, because they can't. I mean, when Miguel Delaney at the Independent is saying that 4 Premier League teams could be forced into administration if action doesn't resume by the summer, you're getting to a different level here. They can't afford to wait. They're not going to wait. It's just not going to happen. And the lower divisions are going to have to make a decision. Can we play games behind closed doors and, yes, take a hit, but finish our season? Or are we going to call it and create some kind of a playoff to determine promotion and relegation? Or are we just going to call it and let the table stand and use points per game or whatever it takes? They're going to have to make that decision, because the plea here of, no, wait for us, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And it doesn't make sense for it to. I mean, it doesn't. Should the Premier League have 4 teams go into administration? Should the Premier League break contracts with their TV partners to wait until a League 2 game can happen in front of fans? Probably not.
Mm-mm.
You can't, and it's not something that any of us want to be the case. It just is the case. And if teams can't play games behind closed doors, if leagues cannot play games behind closed doors, then they have to make their decisions. And in this case, you're going to have the FA involved, because they're going to have to be, and we saw in Scotland. I mean, Scotland is a prime example. That vote canceled everything underneath the Premiership. It didn't cancel the Premiership. That's going to be a decision for that league to take on its own. And I'm shocked that they haven't taken it, but it's Scotland, and it's bordering on Argentina levels of insanity. But that's how it's going to go. You're going to get lower divisions that say, no, we're good. We can't do this. It's better for us not to play. And you're going to get top flights that are going to say, we have to play. It's better for us to play behind closed doors, and we're going to do it. And this is how we're going to do it.
You mentioned the Miguel Delaney piece. We continue to talk about Bournemouth. Bournemouth, remember, was in League One 7 years ago. And player costs have gone up 9 figures to the left of the decimal place, £40 million in the last 2 years. The TV revenue that they got in the 2018-19 season, £116 million. 88% of their income from TV revenue. Vitality, smallest stadium in the league at just over 11,000. So this is the shining beacon to that discussion if things in the Premier League fail to happen. And the numbers that were reported were that Bournemouth's owner, Maxime Demin, lost $30 million in the year from May 2018 to May 2019. So that's what you're staring at with a Bournemouth. I'm sure we could probably figure out who the other 2 or 3 are that are right up there against it.
Look at the bottom of the table. I mean, that's probably what you're looking at.
So, I mean, that is what you're staring at if you don't finish. And I mean, if you want to look at it and put it into some kind of a context that's attached to sports here in the States, if college football doesn't happen in the fall, think of the Power 5 conferences. They are the big businesses that drive the engines of a lot of the colleges' other sports, and it all floats downstream from that point. If LSU doesn't play football and earn that $55 million that they earned last season from TV revenue and bowl games and all the other things that they got, what makes you think if they don't play that LSU couldn't keep all of their sports alive, that they would have to trim sports? That
you
baseball
will probably see baseball will be higher up the list. If the SEC doesn't play football this year, there's a very good chance you don't see SEC women's soccer the following year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just a fact.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't make money. It doesn't. It's there for Title IX. That's why it was added. It's the only reason it was added. That's why you don't have men's soccer. That's why, you only have Kentucky and South Carolina, I think, and maybe Texas A&M, but I don't think they have one. Kentucky and South Carolina have men's programs. Vanderbilt dropped theirs years ago. But you have a women's SEC because of Title IX and because football pays for it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in a couple other cases, basketball might chip in. Kentucky probably would be one of those cases.
Yeah.
That's it. So, I mean, you're going to start looking at what's the biggest cost and what has the biggest red number next to it, and that's what's going to get cut. And there's a very good chance, because we've heard ADs and everybody talking about it, there's a good chance that you don't have fans in the stands for college football. Now, if you can play the games, you still have the TV product, and that's a huge part of it. And that might be enough. But these are the things that drive the conversation, whether we like it or not. And it's not about being insensitive, and it's not about being reckless. It's not about not caring about human life and all those things. It's a reality, because it's not just we want to watch a game. Those games, not just the emotion that they create, not just the good feeling that they create, the business that they create, the jobs that they create, the revenue that they create that funds other things, foundation work, all kinds of things. There's all kinds of elements of it that are at risk because of this. So that's why you have the Premier League pushing forward and wanting to find a way to play. It's about the bottom line. And that's not a bad thing. It's not an incorrect thing for a business to want to function and find a way to function. Sport is a business. I mean, it is. It's more. Like, I think it's in a specific category of businesses that give you an emotional feeling as well as just the transactional side of it. But, yeah, it is. And that's going to be part of the discussion. There's no way it can't be. And we'll just have to see what that timeline looks like across the board. And I don't think it's going to be consistent. I think Germany will get back on the field first. I think there's a very good chance that the leagues in this country will probably follow before other major ones do. I think we will see some smaller countries get back underway. Switzerland, I think, is shooting for the end of May. A little bit easier to control things in a smaller country. It's a little different. I think Germany will play, and I think leagues in the United States, sports leagues, will play before the Premier League, before La Liga, before Serie A. That's my gut feeling today on April 28th. That could change tomorrow. That could change either way. That could change on
as
either
of
side.
This show and the words that we are currently talking.
That could go either direction by tomorrow morning. That's kind of where we are with all of this. But I think, the people who listen to the show, and we're all in the same boat. We all want to see it come back, but we're also all very cognizant of the fact that it can't come back in the way that it left us, with large crowds and everything that goes along with it. Not straight away. I think we all hope that can happen sooner rather than later. But, what is that process for coming back? That's what we've tried to break down and explain, and it's what we'll continue to try to do as we figure it all out along with everybody else, because nobody has the answers at this point.
But to be able to look at it and update folks with what is going on with the here and now, even though the here and now might change hour to hour, day to day, that's what we'll keep talking about. And thanks to everybody who wants to talk about it with us on a daily basis, for the folks that reach out on social media, who sit there and comment about the fact that when we don't have a morning show, then all of this stuff happens, and we come on with a show.
It always happens that way, doesn't it?
I know.
It's like something will come up, and I'll have a conflict, and it's like, no, we're not going to do a morning show. We're going to do something different. And then crazy things happen every single time.
Did you and Nick get to talk about Newcastle and then the Eredivisie?
No, well, we talked about the Eredivisie some, but we didn't talk about Newcastle. We'll save that for tomorrow because I'll tell you what my here and now includes, and it's a barbecue sandwich.
Attaboy.
That's what my here and now includes, and probably another beer because it's been
one of them days.
It's been one of those months and weeks and whatever because everything's a whatever these days. But
True.
We'll all try to figure it out together while we can, and we will try to keep things as normal as they can be, which will include a show tomorrow morning. So hopefully we will prevent any chaos from happening around the world by having a normal schedule for tomorrow.
Yes.
We'll see how it goes. But we'll be back in the morning, 9 o'clock. We'll reschedule our watch-along of the U.S. Trinidad and Tobago game from 1989 for later in the week. I got a podcast that'll come alongside of that as a precursor about the national team and the World Cup bid and how everything was intertwined going to Port of Spain, Trinidad for that game, because there was a lot more riding on it than just qualifying for the World Cup. It was very complicated, as U.S. soccer typically is. So we'll have that later this week. We'll be back in the morning talking about Newcastle, and there actually could be some updated news by the time we get to the show in the morning. We'll see. 9 o'clock, SDH app, soccerdownhere.net, the redesigned soccerdownhere.net, by the way, and on Spreaker. And you can listen to it later on your podcatchers. Thanks for joining us this evening. Thanks for catching us later if you listen to it on demand. And we'll be back tomorrow. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.